Hey, Howard here at 82 Maple. By way of context for this video, I'll ask you to reference back to part one of this series, but in a nutshell, none of my comments are in any way to be construed as me having a negative experience with my amazing Norwood HD36 sawmill. Rather, it's about adjusting one's expectations. And number two, hey, it's about the journey. It's not necessarily about the destination. And in that sense, I'm hoping that the observations of the last 2 years are helpful to you in forming your expectations, your questions, along with perhaps stepping around a couple of little landmines that I seem to have stumbled into. So let's get right at it. This is about the Sawhead, and I had just finished a cut on a 16-foot log one day, had brought the saw back. It was just about to this position right here in terms of the return, and totally unexpectedly, I see a little puff of smoke here from the lift head cables. I'm just going to throw a little light on here for Coral as she's videoing. And right about here, this cable was absolutely glowing in the dark, red hot. And before I could react at all, that cable snapped. And what happened is the extra weight of the saw head, it's got to be 600-700 pounds, caused this cable to snap nearly immediately. The saw head, without any delay, just crashed right onto the deck. It was literally probably the most terrifying experience since I bought this sawmill. And so, well, what caused it and what could I do about it? So I made a quick phone call to our friends at Norwood, and they asked me if I had the grounding mechanism for the Sawhead. I didn't know such a thing existed. What they did is they offered to express freight one to me ASAP. So that solved my longer term problem. The longer term problem being, what do I need to do to prevent this from ever happening again? And the grounding kit is actually consists of a very few simple pieces. There's a little copper grounding piece here that goes back and forth on the track, and it attaches right here in this corner. There are no instructions that come with this little kit, but it's pretty straightforward. So this little copper piece goes down here. There's a little spring goes atop it, and then you get it to the right height, just to where the spring keeps this firmly on the track, and adjust the nut, lock it down, scrounge up a couple of these bolts. It goes right in there, and you're in business. I didn't realize that this was a problem in terms of if the saw head loses its intended ground, and I have no idea what causes that, but it's a known issue with Norwood. It'll find a ground. And so it found a ground right through this lift cable. But what to do about my short-term problem? I kind of cut evenings and weekends. I've got a full-time day job. And so what was I going to do to get operational again? So it's off to Princess Auto and to buy a 100-foot roll of 1/8 inch cable. This cable is rated at 1,700 pounds. It's on a pulley system, so that would double it. And again, this saw head is nowhere close to 1,700 pounds. And I've got 2 lift cables here. There's one over here on the operator side as well. So I strung that up, and I'm putting in some still photos here of exactly how I adjusted it. And you know what? It was kind of 4 to 5 hours front to back, including the trip to buy the necessary parts. And we were back in business again. I just feel so fortunate that it wasn't worse than it was. In all, a 4 to 5 hour fix, $100, a permanent solution for the grounding longer term. But you know what? Had that saw head crashed, 2 or 3 feet earlier, it would have done a lot of damage to these components under here. And who knows what would have happened with the blade. It could have impaired my 82 maple, keep all 8 fingers and 2 thumbs intact. So I hope that this is of value to you. Now let's move on to the next item. The next item being, we're going to come around here, and I'm going to bring my trusty light. We're kind of losing daylight here during the winter. And there's a little safety mechanism right here that you will recognize. So, and what that safety mechanism did originally is there was a metal tab here. You're familiar with it. And if this cover isn't on and the metal tab isn't inserted here, the saw simply won't start. Well, about a year in, and maybe we're talking 60, 70 hours of, here, Carl, I'll help put a little light on there. How's that? I'm my own lighting technician here this evening. And so maybe 40, 50 hours in, I just went to start the engine up one day. Hey, I'll keep that there. And it wouldn't start. So by process of deduction and just listening to it, you can kind of tell when it's a fuel problem or when it's an electrical problem. And it was clearly an electrical problem. So by process of deduction, I looked at this and it was pretty much in the shape it is now. And so my solution to keep sawing was I just went around the back end of this, and there you see it. I just snipped the wire, it started, and that was that.
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Oh, that's Siri talking to me now. Let's ignore Siri. She's having trouble hearing me. I hope you're not. And so we're going to move now around to the other side, and we're going to look at the emergency switch. So I solved the problem of the safety on the Sawhead cover. And you know what? I've been around equipment my entire life. I started washing parts for my dad down at the sawmill when I was 5 or 6 years old, just a little bit to amuse myself for a couple hours during the day while my dad did some sawmill maintenance on a little sawmill outside of Horsefly, British Columbia. And, so I've grown up around equipment, and there's no way that I'm going to start up this saw with the saw cover missing. So I feel confident in that, so I wasn't too worried. Of greater consequences probably was the loss of the emergency stop switch as soon as I cut that wire. Of course, that broke the entire circuit, and now I have no emergency stop switch. So what's the solution? Well, I'm probably going to take the key starter unit up here and run some wires and over the framework, and I'm going to take it right down here to the operator station. You know what? This is probably where that should have been mounted in the first place, so that as an operator, if I'm running into an issue here, I can just start, stop right from there. I'm going to make it a push button and an on-off beside it, and we'll fix it. I'll fill you in on that later on. Hey, you know what? Let me just conclude by saying none of these are negatives about this unit. This is part of the journey, and I thoroughly enjoy it. And let me say it one more time. I'd buy this unit all over again. It's a ton of fun. Stay tuned for part 3 in this series. We're going to talk about dust collection, having to do with some of that stuff over there, about some quick fixes and adjustments on the saw covers, about putting in a little bit of a safety mechanism here beside the saw. We'll cover all of that in more detail. Stay tuned. 82 Maple. It's a ton of fun.